Hello friends, welcome to Welcome IAS and to our Indian Express Demystified series. Let's start with our today's newspaper analysis of Indian Express. First of all, I would like to tell me about myself. I am Dr. Rajesh Kumar Mohan. I have done my MBBS from Government Medical College, Chandigarh. I have also worked as Assistant Medical Officer in Indian Ordnance Factory Health Services. With regard to my UPSC journey, this is my fifth attempt. I have written mains 4 times and have cleared mains exam in 2019 and 20. I also recently qualified in UPPCS 2020. So, with this small introduction, let's start with our today's newspaper. So, on the first page of Indian Express newspaper, we are having these news. First is the US eyes joint production of Johnson & Johnson vaccine in India. Then center is relaxing RT-PCR norms, and then Allahabad High Court has remarked that Election Commission and higher courts that government failed to see risks for holding the polls. So all these are there. So let's discuss them one by one. First of all, US right now there is a second wave of coronavirus going throughout the country. So US being a strategic partner of India is trying to helping India as much as possible. So in this regard, Johnson & Johnson vaccine, because right now we are having very large population of our country still not vaccinated against COVID. In fact, only 2 doses have been received only for 2% of the population. So, in order to ramp up the vaccine manufacturing in India, Johnson & Johnson vaccine is planning to set up joint production with Serum Institute of India. So, this is the first news. Second is Central has relaxed RT-PCR norms. So, we need to know about this testing. So, right now what we are using for coronavirus testing is an RT-PCR test, and second is that we are using rapid antigen tests, RATs. So both have pros and cons of each other. This is a highly sensitive and specific test coronavirus, and it detects RNA of the coronavirus. So it is used to diagnose the patients. However, rapid antigen test has low sensitivity and specificity. So because of that, the validity of these tests is not that much certain. However, they can be done in a very short time period. Now, what has been the policy with regard to testing is 30-70 policy. In order to discourage states to focus more on rats, it was decided that maximum 30% of the testing would be rapid antigen tests. So this was the policy before the second wave strike. Now what we are experiencing is a rapid surge in the cases of coronavirus cases. So because of that, now center has decided to relax it and has allowed RATs to be ramped up. So this can be done through 24/7 antigen test booths that would be established in various districts and various regions of the country. So why there is a need for increasing RATs is, first of all, we are right now realizing that it is taking so much time to get a report of RT-PCR because of heavy caseload, and it takes time in processing, and there are very limited centers for this. Second is that knowing about the prevalence of disease is very helpful in designing the implementation tools and how to respond to the disease. So in order to get more data about it, RATs are being promoted. So how it would be done is, first if all there would be 24/7 antigen testing booths. Second would be that now the requirement of accreditation for those laboratories which are doing RATs would be diluted to an extent. So this was a small news regarding this. Second news is that one more heading that we forgot to mention here is that how the coronavirus is going to impact the rural economy. As we know, during the first wave of the corona pandemic, agriculture sector was one of our strengths. In fact, it has registered a positive growth rate of around 3.5% when the other sectors of economy had seen contraction. But experts right now, especially chief statistician, they are saying that the second wave would have very devastating impact on the rural economy. How the impact would be different is, first of all, previously there was rising food inflation because first agriculture is produced, then it goes to the agriculture, the primary mandis, then urban mandis, and then it is distributed. Now there was a disruption between primary mandis and the urban centers, but that was resolved later on. However, right now what we are facing is that even in the first step itself, we are having supply side disruptions for our agricultural commodities. So this would be more problematic, and the food prices would rise because of that. Second aspect is that if food price in a world where we are experiencing the commodity prices rising, so if we have less volume of food because rural economy is under a distress, so we may be forced to import food articles, and that importation may be tried, but it would be very costly because the commodity prices in the international market are very high. Third aspect is that rural India is a agriculture based economy. Agriculture has a multiplier effect on the economy. So if agriculture itself is depressed, that multiplier effect would not be there. Fourth was that last year we experienced something called pent up demand. What happened was that last year, before the lockdown was imposed, certain decisions with regard to the purchasing were delayed. So because of that, there was a V-shaped recovery in the economy, as shown by rapid economic indicators like GST increased more than 1 lakh in a month. So maybe this time this pent up demand would not be there. So the economy is going to face headwinds. Next problem is there is so much uncertainty about this virus, especially with regard to the third wave. So people are not because if there is uncertainty, what households will do, they will go for saving because they know in future the demand for money may increase. So rather than investing, they would be saving, and so this would have a very bad impact on the demand of the various demand side of the economy. So in a way, it would have this second wave would have a far worse impact on the economy of the country. So with this, I think let's move on to the second article. So this is the editorial, the House must sit. If we see that there are three, it is generally said there are three pillars on which state is built. These pillars are executive, judiciary, and the parliament. Right now, during this pandemic, what we are witnessing is that executive and judiciary are working, even though there have been allegations of neglect from the executive side. Yet judiciary is working very fine. But what we have witnessed is the parliament is missing from this equation. So it is important that we develop a mechanism that parliament is again able to fill its mandate. In fact, parliament is a place where people's representatives are coming and discussing the problem. So the role of parliament is very important at this point of time. So in this context, what has happened is that leader of opposition in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, they have written to the Prime Minister and Speaker and Chairman of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha respectively that Parliament should have special session. There are provisions for special sessions in our constitution to discuss the COVID response. And second is that parliamentary standing committees, they should be done in a virtual mode. So these demands raised by these opposition leaders is very genuine because this will increase the accountability of the government functionaries, which is the primary function of parliament. Rather, it is when parliament is missing, judiciary is trying to fill that gap. At the same time, it will inspire confidence among the people that their representatives are at least discussing the issue that concerns them the most. In fact, there are various models we are having which we can use to open our parliament. We can use the hybrid model of UK. So what is this hybrid model of UK? In this hybrid model, what we have is some people of parliament would be allowed to come into the in the house and discuss the debate. Those who cannot come, they can do video conferencing. So in this way, there would be less number of people, plus as we have a very limited number of people, so we can ensure that COVID appropriate behavior like social distancing, testing, and the proper mask, facial can be used in order to conduct this session. So there is a high time that the house must sit. So this is the theme of the editorial. Next is they secure the teacher. So in this article, the author is trying to say that teachers should be considered as the frontline workers. Frontline workers. So he is so the author is giving certain points which support inclusion of teachers in frontline worker. First point is that, first argument I will say is that in this second wave, what we are seeing is that teachers are going to the forefront. In fact, non-academic duty of teachers like conducting elections has been in the news. In fact, in UP, we had cases where teachers who were on the panchayat election, they died in disproportionate numbers due to COVID cases. Second aspect is that there is a growing realization, yes, online education is a reality, and in fact it has certain positive points, but there is no replacement to the face-to-face interaction of teachers and students. The children need physical space to interact with their teachers, then only their full personality will be developed. So because of these reasons, I think the author thinks that teachers should be considered frontline workers, and priority should be given in testing them, in giving them the vaccination, in providing them the apparatus to prevent the spread of the virus like PPE kits. So this is about this article. Now let's move on to the next one. The Yojana reality check. Here the author Harish Damodaran is trying to point out how the present NDA 2 phase has lost the kind of image of implementation of schemes that NDA 1 was able to success, and on the back of which it was able to come again. So now what analyzing other schemes as well, but more specifically Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So it was launched as a world's largest healthcare insurance scheme. In fact, 10 crore, more than 10 crore PMJAY cards have been allotted to provide insurance to theoretically close to 50 crore people in the country. However, this on paper has not been reflected on the ground. Why? Especially seen during the pandemic. Why is it so? Because first of all, we do not have the hospital infrastructure. It is gravely lacking in the country. Because of that, this scheme is not implementing. Second is that previously, in order to know the success of the scheme, performance-based dashboards were used, like Jan Dhan, Swachh Bharat. This time, these performance-based dashboard have not been able to successfully come out with a solution, as seen in this oxygen mismanagement, where then mismanagement of the bed allocation. So there is a high time that these schemes, they should be implemented on the ground, and some innovative steps need to be taken so that they are able to reach the ground level functionaries. Now let's move on to the next article. Here Upender Baxi, whom you can quote also on multiple instances. So he's saying ki there are two kinds of approaches: business as usual approach and what we have humanitarian approach. So in a disaster, we should focus on adopting a humanitarian approach. Business as usual approach means that whatever normally used to happen, we go by this. For example, there should be patents for any new innovation. Yeah. Then these should be enforced on the ground. Then people should be those people who take risk should be allowed to profit out of it. However, during disaster related situations, this business as usual approach results in COVID profiteers. These profiteering is highly unethical because it is these profiteers, they gain out of those poor people, and at this time poor people need the support. So example can be given of these vaccine manufacturers, where the whole of the economy, especially the vulnerable section, migrant workers, are not having wages to survive. These vaccine manufacturers are making huge profits. This has happened despite the fact that, first of all, during vaccine development, governments of India and in fact government of other worlds also supported financially, technologically and other means. So this vaccine development is not solely because of the efforts of these companies, rather the government has also contributed to it. Second, these governments have placed huge orders, bulk orders have been placed on these companies, resulting in their profitability. So this profiteering is highly unethical. Rather, what we should go for is a humanitarian approach. What can be humanitarian approach? We can look at the courts. In court says that in Indian Patents Act there is a provision of compulsory licensing, but the executive and the government are not using this provision. What is compulsory licensing is that if there is a patent and if it fails to deliver of their into a jurisdiction, or say if there is a public health emergency, then this patent holder company can be asked to have a compulsory license with a domestic company which will do the production, and some royalty would be given as a compensation, which would be decided by the government. So this will increase the production of vaccine. In fact, India along with South Africa has gone to the WTO, where they are saying that the TRIPS related agreements, they should be suspended for some specific period so that other companies be allowed to use the technology of vaccine production that has been developed. So Upendra Baxi is putting a case for a humanitarian approach to deal with this humanitarian crisis which we are facing. So that's it. Now let's move to the next article. So this article is about UGC's proposal. What UGC is proposing to all the heads of the universities, that they should consider that NCC, National Cadet Corps, should be included as one of the curriculum in the university education system. So this will become a part of something called CBCS, what we can call it as choice based credit system, which was envisioned during the National Education Policy of 2020. So using this as an opportunity, the author is trying to highlight what is the importance of NCC, National Credit Corps, and what are the problems this organization is facing, and what are the solutions. So what is the importance of NCC? It is considered as the world's largest voluntary uniformed organization. Second aspect is that 1/3 of its members are females. So its gender equity is one of the foremost among the world. Third is it inspires confidence in the students that enroll in it. In fact, they feel proud after wearing the uniform. Fourth is it promotes discipline. So this is very good for the overall development of our student communities. However, there are problems that are plaguing this NCC organization. First problem we are witnessing is that uniform. in fact there are places where in fact basic uniform is not being given to the students. Here the funding pattern of NCC theoretically is like center and state have to share the cost. Our state governments, it is being increasingly seen that they are not giving the necessary funds for this. Second problem is that training quality is becoming poor. In fact, new modes are not being used. Third is that there is increasing usage of NCC for service provisioning as opposed to training. So service provisioning during say festival and other things. So this is not the mandate of NCC. NCC should focus on developing the personality of the students involved. Fourth, I would argument is that what problem is NCC is facing, that most of these NCC students come from disadvantaged section, and mostly they go as soldiers as Jawans in the Indian Army. So the number of people opting NCC and becoming officers in Indian Army is very less. So these are the problems that NCC is facing. Solution is that states should go for increased spending. Second would be that training quality has to be improved. Third would be the initiatives like the UGC's initiative should be encouraged, so that more and more people are able to become part of NCC. So with this, the article is over. Now let's move to the next article about it is a simply put article where a news has been discussed and what are the implications of it are there. So Nepal's Prime Minister Oli, so he has lost a vote of confidence. So as we know, the Nepal has had multiple constitutions post restoration of democracy. Right now 2015 constitution is in effect. So now vote of non-confidence has been passed in the Nepal's parliament, so it is going to have an impact on how the political developments would be there. There would be certainly political uncertainty. So we can discuss what are the legacies of Prime Minister of Nepal, Oli. So first is India-Nepal relations. During this his phase, what we saw was a decline in the relationship. In fact, first of all, there was an economic blockade on account of the Tharu's problem in the Tarai region. Second was that the new Nepal's new map was passed by the parliament, where some regions of India like Lipulekh, like Limpiadhura and like Kalapani, so they were shown as the part of Nepal. So second thing was that China's presence in Nepal increased considerably. In fact, China talked of trans-Himalayan railways, increased investment, increased role during the COVID management. So China's presence in the region has increased manifold. Third is domestically, Prime Minister Oli had what some people called a total control approach, where Prime Minister office was strengthened when intelligence gathering, revenue intelligence, NIA, the anti-money laundering department, all were made part of Prime Minister office. So this was the legacy of Prime Minister Oli. So let's see how the situation unfolds in the future and how India-Nepal relations are going to be in an uncertainty, political uncertainty environment of Nepal. So let's now go to the debate over vaccine GST. So as we discussed in last lectures also, there is a debate going about GST exemption. So right now we have to know what is exemption, what is this taxing, GST taxing, then what is this zero rating. So these terms are important in order to know about the various facets of the debate about vaccine GST exemption. So what is the news? Obviously we all know that West Bengal Chief Minister Shri Mamata Banerjee ji, she wrote a letter to Honorable Finance Minister that the GST on these final producers of essential drugs and medicines and vaccines should be exempted. So that there should be something called zero GST should be there. Now what is this GST regime? So this is called exemption, where we have a 0% final tax on the final produce. However, this does not mean that all the taxes are reimbursed. In fact, exemption can be counterproductive, like Honorable Finance Minister has emphasized on it. So how it can be counterproductive? So in the manufacture of same vaccines, there would be certain products, there would be certain services that would be used, which would be attracting tax would be levied on them. So this tax would be inbuilt in this product that is used. So if they are giving this, so there is a provision of input tax credit. So what happens if 0% exemption is there on these drugs and vaccines? What will happen is that income tax credit would not be given to these companies. So whatever tax that are used in making the raw materials, the services in fact act as high GST as 18%. So that would be there, and the final cost of the produce would be costlier compared to when if there is a minimal tax, say 5% tax is there. So in that particular cases, these 18% and then some other variable taxes that are imposed on the inputs, they would be refunded, and if it is more than the 5% tax that is being levied, so the companies will get some amount from the government. So this is called taxing provisions. There is third thing which is called zero rating. So what is zero rating? Zero rating means that if a product is made or a service is made or anything is made, so it should not have any inbuilt tax, no final tax, no or tax during its processing and manufacturing. So all the taxes are given back by the government. In fact, only the production cost is passed on to the consumer along with the profit. Now, for which things are zero rating allowed? It is allowed for exports. Then it is allowed for special economic zone activities. However, under present law, there is no such provision for vaccines and essential drugs. For that, legal amendment would be needed. So what would be the best way? Would be zero rating of these essential drugs and essential vaccines, which are very much important in the pandemic response. If you compare exemption and minimum, say 5% tax, lowest bracket tax, so this should be preferred over exemption, because as per the existing legal framework, they would not be able to get the input tax credit. So this was about the debate on vaccine GST exemption. So let's now move to the next one. So there this is a news about a US pipeline. So the name of the company is Colonial Pipeline Company. So this company supplies a lot percentage of oil and other petroleum products to the eastern coast of the US. What recently it witnessed was there was a cyber attack by a group which is called DarkSide, and the specific cyber attack was ransomware. So what is this ransomware? In a ransomware, attacker, say cyber attacker like DarkSide, so they would send those files, and whatever a company is having any data on these files are having, so what that virus would go is that would go and encrypt these files. So when these files are encrypted, so this DarkSide is having the key to decrypt these files. So in a way, the company would not able to use the data for their functioning. So if they want to get the key, what these DarkSide, the cyber attackers like DarkSide would do, they will demand a ransom, say money. Generally it is done in bitcoins, because that is an online mechanism and it's difficult to trace it. So this is this is the news that happened. And what would be the now the impact of this disruption on oil prices? Naturally, as the supply is disrupted, the prices will go up. So what are the things that can be done? So this article this suggests that we can use something called zero trust approach. So this is an approach where companies follow two principles. Principle number 1 and 2. Number 1 is that so any action that company does. So company does any activity on the network, so they will suspect that there can be some certain cyber attack with each action on the network. And second is that there would be a verification of everyone, including the CEO of the company, time and again, so that there is no exemption. Even the topmost person is verified time and again when he is having interface with the company's networks. So these two principles can be used to produce what we can call as zero trust approach and help to tackle the problem of cyber attacks on our companies. In fact, our public sector units are also are highly vulnerable for these kind of cyber attacks. So we can adopt this zero trust approach and learn from this attack on US pipeline company, the Colonial Pipeline Company. So with this, today's newspaper comes to an end, and please like, comment and subscribe to our channel, and thank you so much for listening to this analysis. Thank you.